Welcome to This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. I'm Kent Justice. Our podcast in general, we focus on economic development of the River City and throughout our region. Today, we're looking at what's happening at JAXPORT and the incredible impact it has. So our guests are JAXPORT's Chief Commercial Officer, Robert Peak, John Freeman from JAX USA, and Paul Crawford with us from the city of Jacksonville. And so, Robert, just because you're on my right side, I'm going to have you start here. So talk about what is the, if we look at it broadly, what's the economic impact of the Port of Jacksonville?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of ways we measure that. So one way is just the sheer number of jobs. So we had an economist come in a few years ago, and we asked him, how many jobs really are what we call port dependent? And that number was 26,000 jobs in Northeast Florida. And that is, if the port disappeared tomorrow, those 26,000 jobs would probably disappearing. Yeah. There's another measure too that we use in that we count and capture the data behind all the companies that do business at the Port of Jacksonville. If they have an office in Jacksonville and they're shipping through our port, or they're a trucking company, or they're a warehouse company. And there's over 900 companies now in Northeast Florida that have offices in Jacksonville that do business at the port. So that's where a lot of those jobs come from.
Yeah, and so clearly, Chief Commercial Officer with JAXPORT. John, JAX USA, maybe give a brief description of what that is, and then Paul will hear about, certainly the city of Jacksonville has a big vested interest in what happens with the port.
Yeah, thanks, Kent. The JAX USA partnership is a division of the Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce. We're a 7-county regional economic development organization whose members include Nassau County all the way down to Flagler County, west to Baker County, and inclusive of all the counties therein. And we basically are engaged in recruitment activities as well as assisting companies here on the landscape in expanding and growing, and have some other initiatives as it relates to talent development and items like that are very important to fuel the growth that we've been seeing on our landscape.
Okay, all right. And we're coming back to obviously some of the ideas for both of you, but Paul, City of Jacksonville, how are you connected to what we're talking about today, and specifically JAXPORT?
So we're the regulatory agency that helps all these companies get to the point where they open their doors. We do permitting and help them permit their projects. We offer incentives. If there's a competition with another municipality or state, we'll go ahead and offer incentives to the company to entice them to Jacksonville. But for those incentives, they would go somewhere else. So we organize and track the legislation through the City Council and through the Mayor's office with regards to making sure those incentives happen and that business locates in Jacksonville.
So today is the first time I get to meet each of you individually, and then together that we get to talk, but you take me away from the table. I would imagine you know each other from the different sides that you're coming at to try and see the growth happen because of the port. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, John and I have known each other for decades, literally. But we've worked together for probably well over 20 years. And what will happen is you'll have a company, for example, and that company could be located anywhere, not only in the United States, but anywhere in the world. And it might be looking to locate a facility. It could be a manufacturing plant or distribution center, something of the like, somewhere in the southeastern United States. And that's a competitive process. And we would like to see that company locate here because they create a lot of jobs and tax base and economic impact for our community. And so they might come and say, well, we need a community that has a port. Well, we have one. And then John will either plug us in, we'll plug him in depending on who they call first. And there's a whole network of organizations and elements that go into a company selecting a specific location, but often a port is a key component of it.
Yeah, so I didn't know I was in Columbus, Ohio before I moved here. I don't know. We didn't talk much about a port of Columbus unless it was at the airport. But getting to know a little bit about the dynamics of our region and how important the port is and how competitive, boy, it catches my eye when I hear Savannah say, hey, we got... Obviously, there are other ports in the state of Florida.
Sure.
When it comes to what JAX USA Partnership does and encouraging businesses, hey, look here, I've got to imagine you're well-versed in here are the advantages of being with JAXPORT.
Yeah, and we were just visiting earlier on this very subject, and that is that if you go back 20 years ago, I think that we spent most of our time educating companies where Jacksonville was. And now with the new norms of the consumer expectation of fast delivery of goods, overnight services, those rings have shortened, those supply chains have shortened to serve those expedited shipments of goods to our homes and to stores. And so we are seeing now companies aware of these logistics attributes that we have here, whether it's the port, whether it's the confluence of 3 interstate highways, 3 major railroads here in Jacksonville, that nexus where they can serve all of the population of Florida in a same-day trucking scenario, or an additional 70 million consumers to the north and to the west of us in that same-day trucking event.
Well, that was new information to me when I got here on just how close Jacksonville is to so many different parts of the country because of where it's positioned at this northeast part of Florida, and because 95 and 10 and everything is kind of right here where you can disperse from there. So from a logistics standpoint, I guess that makes some sense. One of the things I wanted to talk about, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Kent. Something that he didn't point out is, and this is sort of trivial, but we're directly south of Cleveland, Ohio. So that's pretty far west,
yeah,
if you start thinking about it. And we're the westernmost port on the East Coast. So if you start to take into consideration the logistics opportunities that John just mentioned, that gives us a real leg up in recruiting companies to Jacksonville because we've got a great location.
How about that? So I know just in the last few years there was talk about, hey, we needed to deepen the harbor and we're going to be dredging. Has there been an impact that you've seen already from that opening up larger container vessels, any of those sorts of things?
Absolutely. So the harbor was deepened a little over a year ago, and almost immediately one of the largest ships that come into the port, really they had the capacity to carry maybe 10,000 containers at the time. Well, now those same vessels have been upsized to carry around 14,000 containers at a time, which is about a 40% increase. And in terms of actual volume for us, those ships are carrying somewhere between 15 and 25% more volume week in and week out on those ships than they were prior to the harbor deepening. And that's just the beginning, you know, in terms of ships upsizing. So what we saw was a lot of these shipping lines, the trend in shipbuilding is to build bigger and bigger ships and sail them larger and larger. And if you did not deepen the harbor, if your port is very shallow, you not only risked missing out on the new business, but you risked the existing business just going away and going to ports that had deepened their shipping channels.
Yeah, and that was, I was starting to say a moment ago, Paul, that I know there's a national and even international companies that would be looking around. What's the sales pitch? You just gave me some of it, right? The logistics component of where we are.
Well, I think now the JAXPORT is in a fabulous position of being at the center of these transportation attributes that we mentioned a moment ago. This post-Panamax harbor depth and the ability to accommodate deeper draft vessels into the port allows for us to have more connectivity to other points of origin and destination points over the globe, around the globe. And that then attracts business and industry who may have a supply chain. They want to establish manufacturing in the United States, but also retain a supply chain from the country of their origin to feed these factories to manufacture and distribute their products out of the South. So that is a fabulous, fabulous resource for us to have on the landscape here.
Just a reminder who we're talking with today. You're just hearing from John Freeman from JAX USA, Paul Crawford from the city of Jacksonville here, and the JAXPORT Chief Commercial Officer Robert Peak is with us. So some of these port users are investing, right? I mean, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in facilities all over Jacksonville. Then they're hiring local workers. That has to be a big impact as well.
It is. In fact, that's really the model. So companies will come in, they literally will invest. Some invest, to your point, directly on the port property. So it's public property that's owned by the Port Authority. But those companies collectively are investing several $100 million into that property in new cranes, new warehouse space, new pavement, to increase the density of that pavement so you can carry more boxes in the same footprint. And then there are companies that are coming and investing what we call outside of our gates. They're investing in particularly warehousing, import distribution centers, manufacturing facilities, and they're investing at times tens of millions of dollars or even over $100 million per facility. And then they're using the port, to John's point, to import raw materials or components to do manufacturing or exporting finished product. And that's really why we want to have things like a deeper shipping channel, to have the capability to attract those companies, some that come from all over the world, that will come and invest in Northeast Florida, and they hire local workers. They create a local workforce, and again, they pay taxes, they invest in our community. And that's really why we do what we do at the port, is to create the capability for these companies to come invest and create economic impact for Northeast Florida.
What are conversations like at City Hall concerning what we just discussed there and these companies that are investing on port property or outside and warehousing and all of that?
So the way we look at things is we look at it through a return on investment. If you look at it strictly by the numbers, we get tax dollars coming in to offset the rest of the taxes that you and I pay as homeowners. So these big businesses coming in, investing hundreds of millions of dollars, can go ahead and turn around and provide the tax base the flexibility to not only keep our taxes at an even keel, but also to go ahead and build our infrastructure. For instance, out at JAXPORT and Talleyrand, that whole interchange was done for JAXPORT and Talleyrand. Although, before it was done, driving over the bridge, the Dames Point Bridge, it was a nightmare. But we did that with the tax base that these companies came in and created.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I mean, most of us who don't work at the port or have that kind of professional background don't necessarily see what's going on behind the scenes. We say, oh, that looks like that's just what you said. It looked like a disaster. Yeah. Well, really it was laying some of the foundation for the growth that we would see, and again, an impact that we're feeling. John, we've touched on this a little bit, but I was just gonna ask you for maybe your view, the big picture view on the region's economic development initiatives and how port growth just continues.
Again, I think that it continues the ports, the existence of the port and the ports around the world which connect to Jacksonville are continuing to attract industry also. And last year we had 18 announcements from companies who located here. Some of those who have a supply chain and are a port user, and those 18 announcements invested collectively $2.1 billion invested to create operations in Jacksonville, and so there is a direct connection, and I would say that we work collaboratively in what we do, and Robert touched on this point. In attracting a company to site here, it requires great partnerships and collaborativeness, and we are blessed to have great relationships amongst all our stakeholders and partners in this region.
If there's growth, then there's more demand for workers. How are we on workforce development specific to the things that we see happening through JAXPORT?
So let me take that one real quickly. So I think one of our greatest assets is our workforce. We have a large military presence. They're constantly being discharged from the military. They're wanting their second career.
And thank goodness they're saying, and I'd like to stay in Jacksonville.
Well, because it's a great
nearby
place to live, exactly. So they're coming in. That means they're trained, they're efficient, and they're dedicated. And just that pool of employees creates a great foundation for businesses to get their employees from. And then top that with the trickle-down effect, or the secondary and tertiary impacts of the port on businesses, small businesses. Small businesses is an emphasis of the mayor's, that these small businesses start to spin off. And then those small businesses start to grow, and then now we have growth within our city that's homegrown. and we grow those with employees from around our community. And then our community grows by the population and by the tax dollars and by the investments.
And I'd just add to that, we have about 3,000 military separatees every year who separate from their military service. And our understanding is about 85% of them choose to remain in the area, possibly pursue a second career. And to Paul's point, they're absolutely a fabulous, fabulous resource for companies. They're very much in demand, if you will.
Are they getting the right kind of training, whether it's separating from the military, or it's somebody who didn't go to college or is just out of college and looking for that next leg? Are we getting the right kind of training for the workforce?
Well, I think that's a great segue into a couple of initiatives that we have at JAX USA. And one of those is Earn Up, and that basically is connecting three groups of job seekers or candidates.
Earn Up. Okay.
Earnup.org.
Right.
Visit that website. Basically, the quickest way to describe that is it provides people with a roadmap to a career path, and in a variety of industry sectors, whether it's manufacturing or transportation and logistics. And that allows students, veterans, adult learners to go into this website and be able to see what is the career path, what is the map, and what is the compass and the flashlight to get me from where I am today to aspirationally a career that I would like. And this, the website includes typical compensation rates for certain careers across the sectoral landscape.
You know, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the workforce, the size of the workforce in Northeast Florida is something like over 800,000 workers. Mm-hmm. And that is more than some entire cities there are in the U.S. South. And I know that, and Paul and John really know this very well, and that is when a company comes in and says, I'm looking to locate a facility, either their first question or one of the first questions is, do you have the workforce to support you know, this kind of development, this kind of industry? And we're fortunate enough in that we have this quantity of workforce, and to Paul's point, the quality of workforce, that we're able to say, yes, we can provide you with the workforce because that's a critical piece. And so we see that at the port, that as companies have come in, we've seen some companies, to your point, they start off small and then they've grown, you know, in terms of working at the port. And they've been able to grow because they have a quality workforce in Northeast Florida they can tap into to grow their business.
I definitely wanted to touch on this. I know there's a new agreement with Norwegian Cruise Line. So what's the impact here? And is it just about more revenue? Is it reputation? Is it both for JAXPORT?
Well, it's that plus, I mean, there's a direct economic impact in terms of the jobs that are required at the cruise terminal and all the longshore labor for handling the luggage and all the people who actually work in the cruise industry. It's also a great affirmation of Jacksonville as a cruise market here. You know, a lot of those cruise passengers, they're tapping into our geographic location, as Paul was talking about. If you think of how many places you can drive to Jacksonville from within just a few hours in the U.S. South, and we're known as kind of a drive-to port, you know, specifically for the cruise industry. We've had Carnival Cruise Lines in Jacksonville now for 20 years. Well, now here's Norwegian that's come in and provide yet another service offering. So yes, certainly there's some revenue to the port and there's some economic impact, but there's also another opportunity directly for Jacksonville citizens who want to cruise to now have a second offering in Northeast Florida to do that.
Yeah, so if I live here in Northeast Florida, now I've got this opportunity, but it sounds like there's probably those people who are coming in and, hey, maybe I'll come a day early or stay a day after the cruises and experience some of what Northeast Florida has to offer, right?
And that's certainly part of it because the idea is that people can drive here, they have their car here. So, for example, Carnival's cruises, they're 4- and 5-night cruises. Right. Norwegian, some of those will be 4- and 5-night cruises. Norwegian also will have a longer 11- and 12-day cruise. But if you come to Florida, you take a really nice cruise out of Jacksonville for 4 or 5 nights, and then you have your car here, you can take in the local sites as well. And certainly that's something that we encourage in terms of those visitors to be exposed to Northeast Florida and spend their dollars here.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I guess that's going to wrap it up. But I've got all these other questions that I could ask about. I just think that it's, I mean, it's fun for somebody who's not in the industry to learn more about, and I think it should be really encouraging for everybody else to say, oh, let's see how they are connecting, and really appreciate that. Paul Crawford from the city of Jacksonville, John Freeman from JAX USA Partnership, and Robert Peak from JAXPORT. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. And, you know, we're constantly working to bring you more interviews like this one, which are focused on economic growth in our region. So thanks for joining us for This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition.